Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am so very glad that you are here, and I wanted to start by being completely honest about just one thing. Public speaking is actually not my favorite, but decluttering is. And so when I get to speak about decluttering, my heart beats just like a little bit faster, and I can't help but smile because it's as good as a triple shot cinnamon dolce latte on a Monday morning for me, honestly. And here's why. Because when we redefine our relationship to stuff, it restores our dominance over stuff and it subverts its dominance over us. And I have seen it time and time again in my work as a professional organizer. It truly is one of the greatest steps that you can take towards self-care because it's incredibly liberating and it ushers in years characterized by simplicity and contentment. And it's not just for your stereotypical hoarder or messy person. Nearly everyone can benefit from taking an honest look at what they own and why. I feel like the saddest stories in my book are about those people who are missing out on the present because they're too preoccupied with preserving nostalgic stuff from their past or too busy storing possibly useful stuff for their future. And that's why whenever I help someone declutter their home, we begin by discussing what should your present look like for you? Describe your ideal life in your home. You know, more often than not, the answer to that question lies buried beneath their clutter somewhere. So once you get like laser focused on the life that you've always wanted, you can get rid of all those excuses that you've used to avoid confronting your stuff in the past. And there will be more on those excuses a little bit later. For as horrible as 2020 was for a lot of us, one positive thing that it did do was it spurred an unprecedented number of people to tackle their homes and clean out their spaces. It might have had something to do with all the time that we spent in quarantine, but it also could have had something to do with the fact that in uncertain times, and 2020 was certainly the epitome of uncertainty, was it not? People felt surrounded by these issues outside of their control and built a sense of stability and balance by working towards having an organized home with a little bit more room to breathe. The home is often just a reflection of our physical and emotional state. And by addressing the clutter in our homes, we can often improve our internal state of affairs. And if you would like to read more about this idea, check out Gretchen Rubin's book. It's called Outer Order, Inner Calm. And it is a wonderful read that will be included in a list of books that you can check out at the end of this presentation. So we're going to be addressing the correlation between self-care and an orderly home as we continue today. Your home really should be the antidote to stress and not the cause of it. But first, we're going to take a little self-assessment here just for fun. We've just kicked off 2021, and experts say that most of us have 6 things in our homes right now that we really shouldn't have. So I'm going to read off this list. I want you to give yourself 1 point for each thing that you actually own and keep score as I read through this list, okay? Here we go. Thing number 1 is DVDs, okay? Give yourself a point if you have them. Thing number 2 is CDs. Thing number 3 is a file cabinet with more than 2 drawers, okay? Give yourself a point if you still use wall calendars. Give yourself a point if you have takeout menus somewhere in your house. And then give yourself a point if you keep hard copies of manuals, okay? All right, raise your hand if you had just 1 thing on that list. Just 1? How about 2? 2 things? 3? 4? Okay, how about 5? Does anybody have all 6? Be brave. Okay, now I'm not going to fault you for having a few of these things, but if you have 5 or 6, I want you to take really good notes today, okay? So before we dive into the whys and the how-tos, I am going to begin by telling you about the journey that my relationship to stuff has taken and how it eventually led to my work as a professional organizer. I'm a perfectionist, which probably comes as no surprise. It means that I tend to overcomplicate things. For example, I will spend time folding rags into perfectly tidy squares and creating bag buns from our grocery sacks. I color code our passports to match our luggage tags, and I have a habit of spacing hangers very precisely. But it used to actually be worse. I remember stressing over our home decor decisions at 2 a.m. in the morning. I remember sorting my son's Legos by color when he was 3. I would trim the frayed edges from torn pages out of spiral notebooks, and I faced all the cans in my pantry. In short, things and the maintenance of things consumed a large percentage of my time. And this just increased exponentially after I was married and I had 2 kids and I bought a larger home. When our son was born, I resigned from my teaching job. I used to teach art, but I wanted to resign and I still wanted to help out with our finances. So I decided to take up couponing. And soon I had amassed a stockpile in my basement that resembled a verifiable store. It was fully equipped with food, cleansers, grooming products, office supplies, and probably enough paper towels to last us for 20 years. Whether or not I needed an item didn't really matter. If it was a good deal and I had a coupon, then I bought it. But I ignored the fact that my stockpile was quickly outgrowing its designated space. And soon our 1,600 square foot home was just busting at the seams. I just kept adding without ever really pausing to ask myself, are these items helping me create the life that I want? Is the time that I spend amassing all of this stuff really healthy? And why does my house feel so small? Like I'm suffocating in it. It never really occurred to me that I should be editing or analyzing what I owned. I was actually too preoccupied with organizing it. How can I store it? How can I make all of this fit? Our storage room was like one huge slide puzzle where accessing a stock pot required moving the suitcases, lifting the rolls of gift wrap off of the lid, and then, unwedging it from between the other neglected kitchen appliances. All of our excess began to affect my ability to think clearly. It was like all this external clutter was beginning to seep into my brain. I began missing appointments, asking for deadline extensions, and accidentally double booking our schedule. I found myself getting short with my husband and my kids because we disagreed about the stuff in our home. There was no breathing room, no margin, and it was beginning to hurt our family, and I could see it. So the following year, we bought a new house and we were tasked with packing up and moving everything that we owned. And I was pretty sure, just having a larger home was going to resolve most of these issues. In preparation for the move, we began to pull all of our things out of closets, empty our cupboards, and the overwhelm was practically instantaneous. I mean, I knew that a move was a good excuse to get rid of some stuff. But there were these voices in my head saying, you cannot because you might need that someday, or you should not because that was really expensive, or you would never because that was a gift, from so-and-so. Does any of this sound familiar to anybody else out there? So in all honesty, I kept almost everything. And moving day came and my beautiful, spacious new house began to fill up with stuff. And so that afternoon on moving day, we were trying to navigate this oversized couch down the stairs and into our new family room, and we found that there was just no possible way that it was going to fit. And I was actually really disappointed at the time, but it became the best thing that could have happened because our basement family room sat mostly empty for months. And that room became my favorite room because I felt like I could breathe in there. There was so much space. We could pull out sleeping bags and have overnighters. We could host dance parties. We could play games. I had never really had a vacant space filled with nothing but possibilities and potential. Meanwhile, out in our backyard, our oversized garden shed sat crammed full of items that really hadn't found homes in our new house yet. I had actually almost forgotten about most of them until one day in November. And I remember this day because it was extremely windy and my husband had asked me to cancel my plans for the evening because the forecast predicted unusually strong winds. If you've lived in Spokane since 2015, you probably remember this day. That night, the winds definitely picked up and we could hear the wind howling outside, causing branches to break and strike our roof. But then we heard something entirely different. It was this terrifying cracking sound that caused our whole house to shake. So we kind of peered through our basement windows and we saw our enormous garden shed had been entirely flattened by our neighbor's humongous pine tree. I mean, the scene really was surreal. All of our stuff was spilling out everywhere amidst, splinters of wood. We had mangled bicycles, clothing, lawn furniture, tools, household decorations. It was all just lying, littering the grass and laying exposed to the elements. The tree removal services were backed up for weeks because there were lots of people in our same boat. And so all we could really do was to wait and watch as the contents of the shed were covered by snow and eventually molded. By the time we had itemized all the items lost in that storm, our claim came to over $40,000. But as these insurance checks began to roll in, we took a critical look at each loss. Did we really need to replace it? I mean, had we even really missed it that much? And maybe we were actually better off without it. Losing those possessions was actually a turning point for us. We did replace a handful of those items, but we decided to do without most of it. And that is when I finally decided that I wanted to own less. I wanted fewer responsibilities, and I wanted a life with enough margin to enjoy what really mattered to me. And so I started reading books like this one right here. This is called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. I began decluttering and getting rid of items every single day. And so the number of items in our household was on the decrease, even though we had just increased the size of our home. And then a few years later, I was on my way to my daughter's voice lesson when I got a call from my husband, and I was shocked. I just couldn't believe it when he told me that he had just lost his job of 11 years. And so to mitigate the financial impact of this, we had to put all of our purchases on hold, and we dramatically had to simplify what Christmas looked like that year. And in kind of an ironic twist, amidst all those losses, we finally felt like we could breathe. We were less distracted by things, and we were focused enough to redefine what was worth our time and our energy. We hung out as a family more. We weren't as tied to our phones. We had a greater appreciation for all of the people who had loved us and surprised us with groceries and wrote us letters of encouragement to help us get through what was a really difficult time for our family. And I saw that the relationships in our lives began to regain their rightful place. We finally had breathing room, and it had changed our lives. And so when I started my professional organizing business, I called it Breathing Rooms. I was done sacrificing self-care to care for material things. My things were not going to drain my mental and emotional resources or cause me to lose track of my priorities anymore. I had this peace and this renewed focus, and I wanted the same for others who struggled with the accumulation of stuff. And that is what I have been doing since 2018. And so while I could talk about color coding closets and alphabetizing spices all day long, that would really be like putting the cart before the horse. Because organizing in and of itself, it doesn't uproot the cause of clutter, nor does it facilitate any kind of self-evaluation or any internal change. And that is really what is required to have a lasting impact on your space. In my experience, people who think they have an organizing problem usually just have a stuff problem. Organizing is actually a piece of cake if you have less to store. The trick is getting your inventory whittled down to a reasonable amount. So what is my goal for you today? Quite simply, my goal is to convince you that less is more. I would love to encourage you to make editing your spaces a daily and lifelong habit so that you can enjoy life to the fullest. And I want you to see that you can actually add value to your life by subtracting some stuff. Now, don't get scared, okay? Don't tune me out. I am not touting staunch minimalism here. I am not saying that removing clutter is an easy task and that you should be able to do this completely all in one go. My journey certainly has taken years, and it honestly is still in process. I often tell my clients that decluttering is kind of like peeling away the layers of an onion, okay? It's not necessary to peel all of the layers away at once. You can peel just one at first, and when you feel ready, you can peel another. And with each layer, the next layer becomes a little bit easier. Your ability to identify what you should keep and what should go gets sharpened the longer that you keep at it. And when you get to the right balance, you're going to feel it. There is no one size fits all solution. And I know that each one of us has their own comfort level when it comes to stuff. But it is easy to see that our excessive American culture has had widespread negative effects. The US storage industry has an annual revenue of $38 billion. Now think of that. That is $38 billion that people are throwing away on storing things that they're not even using. And why? I mean, storage units increase our housing costs without increasing our standard of living. They represent delayed decisions which undermine our future by creating stress and anxiety and frankly, emotional fatigue. Modern culture has coined this phrase, retail therapy, which would suggest a benefit or even a form of self-care, but in actuality, it sucks billions of dollars from consumer bank accounts, and it's put millions of people in serious debt. Too much stuff breeds overstimulated kids who struggle to focus, and overcrowded homes strain our relationships and lead to arguments with those living with us. It can even cause social isolation due to, this feeling of embarrassment that I can't have guests over because look at my home. The fact is, having more isn't making us happy. And even worse, it's taking us away from the things that should. So, how do we combat the stuff that is keeping us from living the lives that we dream about? It begins by clearly defining the life that you've always wanted. Some people call this your why. You might want a home where you can entertain. Maybe you want, the arguments to end about the clutter between you and your partner. Maybe you've dreamed of recording music, but there's just no space in your home for the studio. So right now, what I want you to do is I want you to, if near you, you have a piece of paper and a pen, I want you to grab it and I want you to take a minute to write down a few descriptors of your perfect life. It might it might help you to ask yourself, what would I do with more time and energy? Or what would I do with more space? Or maybe, what stressors could I alleviate if I had less stuff? So go ahead, I'm gonna give you not enough time, but I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to a minute to start to ponder that question. And I want you to write down what immediately comes to mind. All right, and I know you have not probably completed your thought, but what I want you to do is now I want you to consider what you wrote there and see if you can boil it down to just one word, okay? Maybe that word is freedom, or maybe it's peace, or maybe it's relationship, or clarity, mental clarity. And I'm going to suggest that you write this word down and keep it in a highly visible place, like a kitchen windowsill, so you see it when you're doing your dishes, or maybe your nightstand, or maybe on your bathroom mirror. Try it, because doing this is going to keep you motivated and focused when the piles in your home start to feel overwhelming. And it's also going to help get you over that hump when you come across an item that is particularly hard to part with. And we all have those. Okay. One of my very first clients was a young woman who had recently become a new mother to twin boys. Her home was small and overfilled. Her dining room had been taken over by a mountain of paperwork and baby sundries. Her husband's clothes actually consumed their entire master bedroom closet. So she was sharing a closet with the twins in the nursery. But in all honesty, most of the clothing in the home was strewn all over the floors or piled up in laundry baskets around the house. The living room was mostly occupied by an oversized playpen filled with toys. So many toys, in fact, that there really was no room for the babies to play. And because it was often difficult to find items in her home, my client would simply resort to repurchasing them. So as we dug through her cupboards and her closets, we unearthed multiple pairs of scissors, multiple nail clippers, multiple tape dispensers, even a collection of egg boilers, and more solo socks than I could count. When I asked this client to define her why, I could see that she was emotional about it. She told me that she didn't want her boys growing up thinking that this was normal. She didn't want to see them struggle the way that she did, and she wanted to set a better example for them. And so we decided to write her word, example was her word. We decided to write it on a rock and set it on her bathroom's pedestal sink for the next several weeks as we worked through their closet, their kitchen, their nursery, and then finally their living room. After a few months, they decided to put my services on the back burner because they wanted to save for a new house. And after about a year had passed, I received a text message and a photo of the new home that they had just purchased. And she was so excited to share with me her decluttering progress, and also was asking for my help organizing their new place. It is truly always an honor when someone trusts me to help make their new house into a home. But what touched me the very most was when I unpacked that first box, I came across a dark, smooth rock with the word example still faintly visible on it. And that story truly illustrates perfectly the power of a clearly defined why. But identifying your why is typically the easy part. People tend to get stuck then when it comes to the purging process, because let's be honest, getting rid of stuff can be really hard. So take a deep breath. Here we go. But first, true confession time here. I run into some pretty crazy items when I go into houses. Umbilical cords, positive pregnancy tests, pet ashes. But I get it because I struggle to get rid of things sometimes too. For example, I kept a tiny white porcelain box filled with my son's baby teeth for the longest time. Is that crazy? I don't know. Are there any other crazy moms out there, or am I the only tooth hoarder in the group today? I might be. But the truth is, people often struggle with decluttering because they think of it as deciding what to get rid of rather than identifying what to keep. Whenever I go into a new client's home, I am typically met with a mindset that is fixed on finding things they don't love so we can get rid of them. Because that's what we naturally do, right? When we start to declutter, we look for the things that we don't want. But what if, and you can take your mental highlighter to this, please highlight this. What if we focused on favorites instead of unfavorites? What if we focused on the things that we would surely miss if they were gone? Whenever a client and I determine to pare down a category of items, I begin by asking them to identify their favorites. And we preserve those and protect those first. And then we look at all the items that remain. And using their favorites as a standard by which to measure, we decide if all the other things are even worth keeping. Don't think of decluttering and purging as a scary process that's going to force you to let go of all the items you might miss someday. Think of it as weeding out all of the unfavorites so that you can truly cherish the items that you love. So we're going to carry this mindset with us into the next segment of this talk as we discuss 6 steps to less clutter. We all love steps, right? So here are 6 practical steps that can work with any and every area that needs some decluttering and organizing love. Okay, if you are taking notes, step number 1 is to empty your space. Notice I did not say buy containers. Everyone wants to start with a trip to the store to buy baskets and bins, but how can you buy proper containers before you know how much you're going to keep? Plus, you just may find that you already have a lot of containers that will serve your needs. So write it down. Buying containers comes last, okay? I always say a beautiful space begins with an empty space. Think back to when you decided what to store, where, and how. It was likely on moving day when you were mentally sapped and physically exhausted, and you just needed a place to put those items so that you could get the rest of your boxes unpacked, right? You were hardly in a frame of mind for smart long-term storage solutions. After some time living there, you now know what works and you know what doesn't work in your home, and you are in a much better state of mind to consider new storage options and possibilities. So, emptying the space gives you back that blank canvas you had on moving day, and it might even inspire some new and better ideas. Plus, emptying a space brings you face to face with the shocking realization of how much stuff you had in there. And frankly, the shock value is often what gives clients a little added motivation to purge. Plus, it forces you to touch every single item in the space and make an intentional decision about whether or not it will return to the space or not. I can't tell you the number of times that a client has said, "Oh, we don't need to open that drawer because I just did that drawer," or "Don't open that closet. I know I want to keep everything in there." And then as we start to empty those spaces, they end up purging like half of it. All right, step number 2, if you're taking notes, step number 2 is to categorize. Now in this step, you are going to want to identify broad categories of like items and sort everything. Categorizing is what allows us to see the big picture so that we're aware of the contents of the category as a whole. One of my longest standing clients initially called me because she had received notice from her landlord that she needed to clean out her apartment or she was actually going to get evicted. This woman had recently lost her mother to cancer and she was still deeply grieving. And so she had kind of let her apartment go, and she had actually gained a lot of weight as well, which meant that it was hard for her to move around her space, and even a simple task like carrying the garbage out to the dumpster left her feeling completely exhausted. And so when I arrived, we began to chat, and I discovered that the vast majority of the items in her apartment had been inherited from her mom. There was Christmas decorations, kitchenwares, photographs, letters, and a huge collection of dairy cow figurines that her mom had left to her. Now, my client knew she did not have space for all of this, but she was also determined not to part with a single item that had any emotional connection to her recently deceased mother. And so what we did is we created a category of items with emotional ties to her mom. This category grew and grew until it eventually almost filled an entire room in her apartment. Now, viewing this category in its entirety set my client up to be able to make some purging decisions. And a long story short, we were able to identify her favorites. We pulled out the greatest treasures and we figured out how to showcase those so that they got the love and the appreciation that they really deserved. And not only that, but in the last year, she has lost over 60 pounds. And I have found that in this decluttering journey, it often has a ripple effect that produces some positive changes in other areas for people as well. All right, step number 3, if you're taking notes. Step number 3 is to purge ruthlessly. And please write that word ruthlessly, write it in big capital letters, because this is the step that we are going to spend the most time on today. For this step, you are going to need 6 designated boxes or bags or tarps, and you're going to want to label each one or make them different colors or somehow distinguish each, okay? And if you're like me, a good acronym is always helpful, and so I have created one for you. It's sorted. So if you're taking notes, just put SORTED along the left-hand side of your paper, and we are going to talk about what each one of those stands for and what it involves, okay? So the S is for stay. Now this is obviously for your keepers, okay? Pretty simple. The O is for out or out the door. And that is for anything that you plan to donate, to gift, or to sell. And it really is critical that you deal with your out category as soon as you are done with your organizing project, so that these items don't eventually just sneak back into your home. Here's a suggestion from a fellow homemaker that has recently been circulating the internet. I just think this is so funny. She says, "My husband and I play a game. Whenever we go over to someone else's house, we bring something that we've decluttered and secretly hide it in the house in plain sight." She goes on to say, "We've gotten rid of so much stuff this way, and only one person has ever even noticed." Now, I personally think that this is hilarious. I haven't tried it yet, but I actually fully intend to once COVID is over and we actually start going over to people's houses again. All right, we are on R. The R is for relocate. You guys hanging in there with me? Okay. The R is for relocate, and this is for items that you want to keep, but you actually need to store elsewhere. And it is really important that you don't go about your home relocating these items while you are still working in your space. For now, you simply want to set these items inside of that box, because you know and I know that if you leave the room, you're going to notice the laundry piles or the dirty dishes or the overflowing mail, and your project will become just another good intention that doesn't get finished because you got distracted along the way. The T in sorted is for trash. Now think broken, outdated, tired items, or sets that are lacking critical pieces and parts and components. And don't forget to relegate paper items like old manuals or old receipts that you no longer need, or recipes that you'll never cook, again. These belong in this category too. You can also toss anything that you can program into your phone. You can toss those business cards, those invitations, grocery lists. These are things that can be kept digitally inside your phone so that you can just toss those hard copies and simplify your life. E is for everyone else. And this is for the items that belong to, you guessed it, everyone else. Typically, I say you should not be making decluttering decisions about other people's items, because this can really drive a wedge between people and interfere with healthy relationships. But if that person no longer lives with you, and if you have given them the opportunity to come and pick up those items, I'm talking about fully grown children, maybe renters who lived with you for a while. If you have notified them to come pick up those items, and if they have not, I give you full permission to go ahead and make a decision about whether those items are going to stay or not. Now the D is deal with later. Now this is not an area where you just get to put things off and decide about them later. It's not decide about it later. It is deal with it later. And this is for items that need action taken on them, but you really can't deal with that right now. Maybe it's for items that you need to wash, or you need to repair, or maybe it's for items that you need to sort through with a fine-tooth comb, like journals or letters or photos or other nostalgic items that might slow down your progress right now. Don't get yourself caught up in that. Put that in your deal with later box and then deal with it later. All right, That is it. Now you just need to assign each item to a box. And you can usually decide which box an item belongs in by asking yourself this question. Okay, this is my go-to question. Do I love it, use it, or need it? Do I love it, use it, or need it? And do I have the space for it? Okay, this question works most of the time, but once in a while, you will come across an item that for whatever reason is just really difficult to part with. I call these 50-50 items, and they can require some additional questions to help you kind of think through your decision. So here they are. Consider jotting down maybe 2 or 3 of these that really speak to you, or maybe for that one lovable but really stubborn pack rat that you have at home, maybe jot down the one you think would work with them. All right, here's your first question. If I'm not willing to fix this right now, will I ever be? Okay. If you're not willing right now to invest the energy to set it on a path towards getting fixed, then maybe you need to release yourself from that obligation and just let it go. Another question you can ask yourself is, if I forgot I had this, did I even miss it? Or how about this one? Would I buy this again? I use this one when we go through closets all the time. Would you buy that shirt again? Would you buy those pants again? Often the answer is no. Another question you can ask yourself is this item adding any value to my life? Or especially if you live in a very small space, ask yourself, is space and accessibility more valuable to me than this particular item? Sometimes it's helpful to say, could I replace this item in less than 20 minutes or for less than $20? This is the 20/20 rule. Am I keeping this item out of a sense of obligation or expectation? Okay. And the last one is, do I have something that can serve the same purpose? If you keep a pastry blender on hand for that one time every couple of years that you actually go to the trouble of making pastries, then consider using your food processor, or maybe you could even use a fork. I had a client one time who insisted that her popcorn bowl could only hold popcorn, and her nearly identical ice cream bowl could only hold ice cream. And for some reason, it had never occurred to her that the same bowl could serve both purposes. One more question for you. Does this item represent who I was in the past or who I am in the process of becoming? If you haven't scrapbooked in years and you have a new passion for, let's say, Dutch pour painting, then make room for your paints by getting rid of the scrapbook paper. The chances are you're not going to miss it, but if you ever do, you can probably get creative and buy what you need from Art Salvage or maybe from the marketplace. Okay, and honestly, this discussion would be incomplete without looking at a few of the excuses that people have for keeping items that they probably shouldn't. I think that most of you are going to identify with some, if not most of these, and there is that little reaction button down at the bottom of your screen, and you can use that to give me a thumbs up to show that you relate to any or all of these as I describe them. So that would be fun for me if you use that button. It says reactions and it has a little smiley face at the bottom of your screen there. Okay, the first excuse people try to give me is, but it was really expensive. Okay, I try to remind people, I see thumbs, I see lots of thumbs. I try to tell people, don't throw good space after bad money. Yes, okay, it did cost you something, but what is the cost of holding on to it? Because cost comes in different currencies: stress, space, energy, time, relationships. And you really can't recover a dime you spent simply by keeping an item for longer, which means at a certain point, it really is better to just cut your losses. Besides, sometimes those expensive items are major guilt producers. Who wants to be reminded of the money that they wasted every time they look at something? Same with clothes that don't fit. I don't need my pants reminding me every day that I've gained 15 pounds over the last 5 years. Okay, those things, they need to go. Okay, excuse number 2. People tell me all the time, but I actually might need that someday. Okay, thumbs up if this is one for you. I mean, that 5th grade math test, yeah, maybe someday that's going to come in handy. Truth is, even if I miss something that I've purged, which honestly rarely happens, my gratitude for having a simpler life almost always outweighs the regret or the inconvenience of not having something that I might have purged. And usually I tell clients, don't stress over what happens to your donations once they've left your home, because this can be something that really complicates the process and slows their progress. Once you've gotten on top of your clutter, then you can be pickier about where your items go. But I do make an exception to this advice for really, really special items, because having a say in what happens to the item can make purging it a little bit easier, especially if it's really a hard one to part with. You can look for ways to maximize the good that comes from your item, and this will help reduce the potential for regret in the future. For me personally, I know that if an item went to a good cause or to a wonderful new home, then usually it still feels like a win, even if I miss it a little bit. Take my wedding dress, for example. Okay, I bet you many of you still have it. But for me too, it felt like sacrilege to purge this dress. I had kept it a very, very long time, but after that windstorm hit us, I finally asked myself, why? Why am I keeping that? I was never going to need it again. My daughter showed absolutely no interest in it. And it was eating up really valuable closet space. And so I found a clothing bank here in Spokane, actually the Dream Center. And they said that they knew a bride who didn't have a budget for a new dress and might be able to use it. And so at that point, I was happy to donate it. And I have honestly never regretted it since. All right, another excuse that people try to give me is, but it's still in great condition. To me, honestly, this seems more like a reason to donate something than not to donate something. If you free this item up, it's going to bless somebody else, especially if it's in great condition. So let that thing go. Super common one, people say, it was a gift, but it was a gift. I can't get rid of it. Super, super common. But my encouragement to clients is to be a grateful gift receiver and a really, really picky gift keeper. Gifts are intended to show love and appreciation, right? And those things are not lost when you purge an item. If an item was gifted to you by someone, what would they say if you told them that it had kind of started to feel like an obligation and a burden? Most likely, they would wonder why you hadn't purged it already. And I realize there are exceptions to this, and it's especially hard when the gift giver imposes guilt on you. But if we kept every single item that we were ever gifted, we would all be in a lot of trouble. Another excuse that I hear all the time, but it's sentimental, or it's a family heirloom, I couldn't possibly part with this. And this honestly, this is a hard one, because things like this are irreplaceable and can be very valuable. Nostalgia always carries an emotional tie with it, but there are emotional ties connected to living in a stressful, overstuffed, suffocating home as well. And to what degree are we willing to let the past interfere with our present and our future? Remember, we're striving for an ideal life here in our present. If the heirloom is truly as special as you say it is, are you storing it or displaying it honorably in a way that reflects how much you cherish it? Or is it sitting in a dusty box up in your attic? I never ever force anyone to get rid of items like these, but I do encourage them to keep those items that can either be used or displayed instead of just stored. I remind them that the longer you hold on to an item, the more valuable it seemingly becomes and the harder it is to get rid of. So you can actually do future generations a favor and only hold on to those things that truly, truly are special. And if you're keeping something with the expectation that your children or maybe your grandchildren are going to want it, double check with them now. Because younger generations, honestly, they tend to be less nostalgic about things. You don't want to store something for years if no one actually wants it. And this is actually one of the ideas put forth in The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning by Margareta Magnusson. I know that title sounds horrible, but it really is a very good read on this topic if you're struggling to get rid of items and you are maybe in the later half of your life. So for some nostalgic items, you might be able to actually reduce the amount of space that it requires to store. Maybe you could just take a swatch of fabric. I've heard people taking pieces of important clothing and creating a quilt. Or maybe you could take the plaques from the trophies and have them somehow framed in one frame, and you can get rid of the bulky trophy. Or maybe you could take a section of the journal or a piece from the collection just for a commemorative representation of that memory. Or maybe you could take a picture. I mean, the irony in preserving too many sentimental items is that you jeopardize having a life worth preserving. So when my grandma passed away, I remember my mom spreading her possessions all over the floor and letting my sisters and I take turns selecting the items that we wanted to keep. I actually took a lot more than I needed because that loss was just so fresh, and I missed her desperately in those first few weeks of her being gone. So I took a silver platter, I took a dozen white linen napkins, a music box, a whole bunch of her bird figurines that she collected, her tea set, a diamond necklace, a crystal lamp. But you know, here I am a decade later, and I have gotten rid of all but 3 of those things. I still have the lamp that got a facelift, and it now serves in my daughter's bedroom. I kept her creamer and sugar bowl from her tea set, which I display in my dining room. And I kept her diamond, which I had actually made into a ring so that I can wear it and cherish it every single day. And after that, I've donated the rest, and I don't have any regrets because I have my very most favorites that represent her, and I look at them and I value them every single day. All right, excuse number 6. It's super tiny and it barely takes up any room. Now, granted, you are right, small things do take up less space, but they are harder to keep track of than large items, and they do get in the way of our best life, just like bigger things. Plus, consider 100 pardons like this one. Eventually, it is going to add up to a lot of sacrifice space. So let those little items go if they're not needed, loved, or used. All right, excuse number 7. And this is a big one. I hear it a lot. I just don't have time to spend on decluttering. My life is busy. Did you know that the average person spends 17 minutes per day looking for lost items? And did you know that this equates to almost 50 full weeks over a lifetime? That is almost an entire year spent in your lifetime looking for things that you can't find because they're somewhere buried in your clutter. So it really is not that you don't have time to declutter. You don't have time not to declutter. What you need to view this as an investment that is going to yield incredible returns in your future. And then maybe this will help you find the time. So let's review. Step 1 was empty your space. Step 2 was categorize. Step 3 was purge ruthlessly in big capital letters. And these last 3 steps are going to go relatively quickly. Step 4 is to find homes for your keepers. So anything that you have put in the S box, the stay box, anything that you have deemed worthy of staying needs to be given a clear and defined home. Often it helps to corral your like items together. But don't get caught up in fancy schmancy organizers. I swear that simple organizers like clear pantry jars. I love mason jars. These are one of my favorite organizers. You can buy a dozen in a box for about $14. Clear mason jars or modular drawer dividers. These here come in actually a couple other sizes. You can find these at the Dollar Tree for $1 each, and they are wonderful, sturdy, lined with rubber at the bottom so things don't slide around. These are wonderful, simple. Another one of my favorites, Sterilite, clear plastic tubs with a lid. These ones you can get at Walmart for 89 cents. You can get them at Target for 99 cents, and they come in all different shapes and sizes, and they work great. A lot better than these fancy kind of trendy organizers. Containers not only provide clear homes and corral, but they also provide you with an idea of a boundary for the category that can go in them. And they remind you to purge when they're full. So think about how, when you're trying to find homes for your things, think about how often you access your items and preserve the prime real estate, meaning the most visible and the most easily accessible space for the things that you use the most. Consider your personality. Are you a macro organizer or are you a micro organizer? Do you love detailed systems, or do you like the simple ones that are quick and easy? Not everyone's going to use and maintain an intricate filing system. You know, do you love digital storage, or are you a hard copies kind of girl? That would be me. It's okay if you don't like scanning and digitizing. Not everybody has to do it the same. Are you visual? You know, do you want to be able to see through your containers? Or do you like to store your items in more opaque containers with pretty labels instead? When you are finding home for things, consider creating an overstock area. I love having backstock, but it can be a problem when it's not clearly distinguished from those items that are currently in use. So my personal backstock area for most things is in my basement, but you can store backstock bins in, you know, the deeper recesses of your cupboards, or on the highest shelf, or maybe the lower shelf. Those are less prime real estate areas. Those are great places to designate for overstock or backstock items. If you are short on space, consider going vertical. You can use the backs of doors. You can use walls. You can use shelf risers inside of your cupboards, or command hooks are wonderful for making use of vertical spaces. You can also orient your stored items vertically to save space. This is sometimes referred to as filing, and Marie Kondo made file folding famous in her 2019 Tidying Up Netflix series, and it really is impressive. If you haven't tried this, it really is impressive how much space can be saved when you fold your clothing and then stand it up vertically in a drawer instead of lying down horizontally in stacks. And then the last thing I would just say about finding homes for your things is don't forget your labels. Labels are super important, especially if you live with anyone else who needs to know where items should live and where they should go. They are really critical to long-term maintenance. You really need no more than just tape and a Sharpie, but I do highly recommend investing in a Brother P-Touch label maker. I have tried the Dymo brand. It's all right. It's a little more affordable, but the Brother P-Touch is super easy. And just a little note too about replacement tapes. Brother will charge you an arm and a leg for refills on the labeling tape, but you can buy an off-brand of labeling tape on Amazon for a fraction of the price, and I have never had trouble with it. So that's what I would do. All right, step number 5, on to number 5, is you got to deal with the items in your other 5 boxes, okay? After your S box is taken care of, you've given homes to those items, you need to deal with those other 5 boxes. These items or these boxes need to be empty before you consider your work done. Otherwise, the items in these boxes tend to hang around your house, and eventually you're going to have to deal with them again. So deal with them before you wrap up your project. And the last step, if you're taking notes, this is step number 6, is maintain. So once you have decluttered, how do you prevent your space from rebounding? This is the single most common complaint that I hear from people who are struggling with their stuff. And I remind people, as soon as you start to view decluttering as a practice and not a project, you're never going to be burdened by your stuff again. It has to be a project, or it has to be a practice. It cannot be a one-time project. It just doesn't work that way. I promise that it is infinitely easier to keep up than to catch up. All right, and there's no magic here. I mean, maintenance is going to require some new habit formations. You're going to need to remember to put items away after use. You are going to need to take the time to file and to fold instead of shoving and tossing, because no amount of organizing is ever going to remove the consequences of bad habits. You can simplify your storage systems to match, the amount of time that you have available or your personality, but you have to follow through with the systems that you've created. Okay. Tip number 2 for maintenance. The first one, by the way, is to create new habits. The second one is, I see this. What was that? Decluttering is a practice, not a project. Okay. Second tip is strive to purge something every single day. Now, this may sound extreme, but you really do, because stuff comes in every single day. And if stuff isn't going out every single day, you are having a net gain in your home, right? So strive to get rid of something every single day. And when the mood strikes, grab a bag and do the trash bag tango, or the 21 thing fling, or the 10-minute clutter blitz. I mean, these are all basically versions of a quick declutter that will get those unneeded, unwanted, unused items out of your home. Okay, tip number 3 is a really important one. It has to do with mindset for maintenance. It is consider 80% capacity full. Okay, we tend to fill whatever space we have. And it is okay to have a little bit of empty space. Empty space is not wasted space. It represents options, okay? So leave yourself 20% breathing room. Because once you're at 100% capacity, that's when overflow starts to happen and stuff quickly starts to take over your spaces and they begin to cease serving their assigned function. You have to respect the boundaries of those containers. And if you set it at 80% representing full, then you're never on the brink of overflow. Okay, another way to maintain your space is that you have to get in the habit of tweaking your systems to accommodate your changing household inventory. Life presents all kinds of changes that are going to require you to flex. If you add a pet to your home, you might be required to move some items out of your mudroom to accommodate the new pet supplies. If one month there's a great sale on soup and you stock up on canned soup, it might mean that you need to rearrange your pasta storage in your pantry in order to accommodate. Your storage and your systems have to change to accommodate new additions to your home. Okay, another tip for maintenance, don't put off tasks that take 60 seconds or less. Okay, yes, this means like rinsing that dish and sticking it in the dishwasher. Tell yourself to get it done now instead of waiting till later, because a lot of times those tasks that we put off till later can take more time to complete later than if we had just done them in the moment. And this is a huge maintenance tip. It is slow the inflow, because it doesn't matter how much you get rid of if you don't stop bringing new items in. If you just spend a day paying attention to the amount of stuff that enters your home in a 24-hour period, whether it's mail or school papers or gifts or freebies, you're going to be shocked. And shopping represents a huge part of this problem. It's a huge temptation for a lot of us, but you can help yourself by shopping with a list. And even then, clearance sales and yard sales are horrible traps for most of us, and an organizer's two greatest enemies. But I will be honest, they do provide great job security for those of us in the industry. This bargain mentality that says, it's on sale, so let's get it. It also says, hey, it's on sale, let's get several. Be aware of this, okay? This has literally cost my clients thousands, and it has completely taken over some of their closets. I'm gonna let you in on a real good secret right here. Everything is 100% off if you don't buy it, right? So don't be fooled by a freebie. Remember, everything is coming with a cost. Costs come in different kinds of currencies. Free is never free. Okay, so when you're shopping, pause before you head to the register. Stop and evaluate the contents of your cart and ask yourself, where am I going to store this? What am I going to use this for? Would I buy this even if it wasn't on sale? If the sale price is the best thing about your item, you probably shouldn't be buying it. Another easy way to remain clutter-free is to have a one in, one out rule. And I'm sure many of you have heard of this. Some of you may already use this. At our house, for example, for every new item that comes in, we get rid of a similar item. I recommend having a designated spot where you store all of these items for donation. We have a box in our garage, and that's where all of those out items land. And when this box gets full, we just load it into the car. And on our way to run other errands, we swing through that little drive-in at Value Village or Goodwill or Salvation Army, whatever, what have you, and we take those items to a local charity. Now, if you began today, imagine the freedom that you would feel in 3 to 6 months. And if you don't begin today, in 3 to 6 months, you're going to wish that you had. I can almost guarantee that after you begin to experience the freedom in your physical spaces, you're going to crave it in your calendar, you're going to crave breathing room in your pocketbook, and in every other area of your life as well. Now, it is true that decluttering may lead you to discover some truths about yourself that you would rather ignore. Maybe you're going to realize that you've been a poor financial manager and wasted a lot of money on meaningless things. Or maybe you're going to begin to see that massive collection of makeup and clothing and weight loss supplements as evidence of your struggle with insecurity. I mean, it might just be that maybe you begin to see an issue with follow through and time management as you stare at that craft room full of projects that you have never completed. But, I realize these items could provoke feelings of guilt and of shame, but that is not their purpose. Don't let them do that to you. The items that you purged that felt like a waste are going to represent lessons that you've learned about yourself. And if you can look these discoveries in the eye and own them, then you can actually move beyond them, freer and healthier and less likely to repeat the same mistakes. And then after all the work of decluttering your home is done, you can enjoy the ease of maintaining your new space. You can pursue a new hobby with all of your extra time. You can use the money that you save to take a vacation if COVID ever goes away, right? It's coming. You can revel in the contentment and the gratitude that you feel for all of these things that you have deemed precious enough to keep. And I want to encourage you guys to look over these notes, revisit these things that you've jotted down. I want to thank you very much for being here and spending your afternoon with me. It truly has been my pleasure spending it with you. Becky has told me that she's willing to forward along a list of books. It includes some of the ones that I showed you on the screen as well.